Good afternoon, and welcome to the Beyond Brexit Opportunities session. My name's Rebecca Miller. I'm a Principal External Relations Officer in the Global Directorate in External Relations. In the session today, you will hear from a number of departments and organisations that are working to support and promote the island's international profile and trade links. Representatives will provide highlights of work they're currently engaged in to enhance the profile of the island, develop links into new markets, and facilitate potential new trading opportunities. At the end of all of the presentations, there will be an opportunity for questions. First in this session, I'd like to introduce Phil from our International Trade Unit.
Hello everyone, I am Philip Roberts from the External Relations Department and work within the International Trade Unit, formerly the Brexit Unit. Our team leads the cross-government coordination of Jersey's interests in order to feed them into the FTA negotiations. This is both in relation to the EU negotiations and those the UK are undertaking with the new third country partners. I am today going to focus on the rest of the world free trade agreements the UK is seeking, providing an overview of the UK priorities, Jersey's objectives on trade that came out of the Let's Talk Trade consultation, and the scope of the opportunities. In terms of the UK's approach, this split is into two categories: a continuity programme and a programme of priority new free trade agreements the UK is seeking to negotiate. The continuity programme looks at essentially rolling over those agreements the UK was party to as a member of the EU, with the only changes being technical ones in order to facilitate the change from being a multilateral agreement to a bilateral one. What this means for Jersey is we will be party to those agreements as far as we were previously under our Protocol 3 relationship. This ensures the baseline we had previously for trade with third country partners is the same as it was before. And that is the starting point in terms of scope for FTAs. The second programme, which I will now focus on, is in relation to the new free trade agreement the UK are seeking to negotiate. The UK firstly focused on Japan. The reason for this, which is because it was originally part of the continuity programme, but both parties wished to seek an enhanced partnership. In order, therefore, to maintain the current relationship, this needed to be agreed before the end of the transition period. The good news is this was agreed in principle in September and is currently working through the formalities to finalise the agreement. The agreement is broadly based on the EU-Japan agreement, and Jersey's involvement is as it previously was, and therefore nothing should change in terms of trading with Japan for Jersey businesses. Other UK priorities are the US, New Zealand and Australia. The US has currently had 5 negotiating rounds, but is likely to pause during the US elections. Australia and New Zealand are running on a normal FTA timetable, with rounds likely to take place every 6 to 8 weeks. The UK in slower time is also exploring the opportunity of joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnerships, also known as CPTPP for ease. So what does all that mean for Jersey? Well, we need to ensure we feed into these negotiations and explore potential opportunities. On the back of the Let's Talk Trade consultation in 2019, Jersey established a number of objectives. The key ones that relate to FTAs are firstly, maintain and strengthen Jersey's reputation as a well-administered jurisdiction. How does this link to the FTAs? Well, being party to them demonstrates our reputation and allows us to promote ourselves, as these agreements are based on recognised international standards. It also has the potential to open up access to working groups and forums that sit under the FTAs, where we can continue to enhance our reputation. The second is enabling businesses to remain agile, innovative and competitive, as Jersey seeks to grow and diversify. FTAs help facilitate this by providing a platform for trade, providing structures and clear lines of access into markets, with the aim to limit the bureaucracy that can sometimes surround trading with other nations. So to summarise at a high level, the opportunity that has come from Brexit in relation to FTAs is scope. The scope is now broader, and we can seek further relations. It allows us to be part of further agreements that the EU did not pursue. It allows us to seek and pursue relationships above and beyond our previous Protocol 3 inclusion for new FTAs. As mentioned at the start, that will be determined by the opportunities and obligations that may come with further participation. And it will be important for us to continue to work with industry partners and business to ensure those opportunities and obligations are fully considered. We aim to provide a platform for business to trade and diversify. That is a very high-level update of the Rest of World Free Trade Agreement programme and what it aims to achieve. I'm happy to take any questions at the end, but we'll now pass over to my colleague Tom Werry, who will take you through how we have enhanced our European strategy.
Thanks, Phil. So, opportunities for our relationship with Europe that arise from Brexit. Opportunities for our relationship with Europe that arise from Brexit. Talk about a challenging topic. But actually, I think that there are some opportunities in this space. I'd argue that the European Union have a better understanding than they've ever had before about Jersey's position. Our politicians have never spoken to regional and national politicians in Europe more than they do today. And we haven't, since 1972, had such an opportunity to reset our relationship with Europe than we currently have. So there are opportunities in this space. Those of you that listened to the ministerial briefing this morning will have heard Senator Ian Gorst talk about how Jersey government recognises that UK exit means that we need to invest more in our relationships with Europe. Yes, this means that we need to deal with certain challenges on the continent. Of course, things like the ongoing discussions on international taxation policy. But it also means improving the relationships that we have there, deepening them and strengthening them. I know that there are many passionate Europhiles in Jersey, many businesses and people that feel a strong connection to that continent. I'd really like to hear from many of you over different ways that you think that we could improve those connections and work on what we already have. I'll give a few examples that government are working on to see if we can get the juices flowing. So, if we move to the first slide, I pointed out a couple of examples on what we're doing to enhance some of those bilateral relationships. The first one there are key partners. Of course, there are some countries that, because of their geographical proximity or their kind of political clout, are key priority partners for us. And France is absolutely the first on that list. So we're looking to grow those ties at regional and national level. We've been working with the British Embassy in Paris, the French Embassy in London, with organisations in Jersey like Jersey Business and the Chamber of Commerce, to look at the business relationships that we have and also some of the cultural ties that we have there. We've been looking at Rennes, which is a thriving and great city very close to Jersey. We've been looking at air links and freight capacity between Jersey and St. Malo. We'd love to see more brands, French brands in Jersey and Jersey brands in France. We know that there is sometimes some challenges on fishing. We're honest about that. But actually, with our permanent office that we have in Normandy, we see quite a stable relationship with the French. I've also on the list there got Germany and Ireland. We've got some really strong diplomatic ties with Germany, and I think there will be some opportunity during 2021 with the scheduling of the German ambassador to visit to look at some opportunities with Germany. I know that we already have a good relationship on tourism. Second category I've got there are the people-to-people connections, particularly strong, of course, with Portugal, Poland and Romania. How you treat people really, really matters, and Jersey's policy through the COVID pandemic has really been noted by the international community. Together with the Polish government, we put on the first ever flight from St. Peter to Warsaw to get people home to their families. Thousands of Portuguese people now call Jersey their home, with a thriving community on the island. Foreign governments really notice this, and it endears them to Jersey and shows them what we're all about. Now, we've got a great agreement with Portugal that looks at education provision, and we've got some thriving connections between Poland and Jersey for various businesses. We're hoping to grow those type of connections. The last category I've got there is new friends. We're looking to speak to different countries about new ideas, new opportunities, and hopefully try and deepen the type of connections that we have on the continent. So that means things like learning from the very best around. The Dutch government is now helping our infrastructure department look at ways in which we can develop our cycle network. We think about some of the strengths that we already have, financial services, of course, and looking at countries that we can work together better with. We have quite a bit in common with Switzerland, so we're looking at talking to the Swiss government about that. And lastly, we look at similar governments around Europe. The Faroe Islands is a very, very interesting jurisdiction and has a similar relationship to Denmark that we have with the UK. Yet they have a very, very substantial international trading network. We hosted a Faroes delegation from in Jersey just last year, and I think they gave some great inspiration to people like Phil, who are looking at our international trading network. So there you have it. It is a challenging topic, but there are some opportunities to be had in Brexit. Thanks very much.
Hello there, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. This is Joe Pennell from the Jersey London office. I hope you can hear me. So when considering opportunities from Brexit, I think it's important to note that in a UK sphere, we start from a very strong basis. That being the Jersey London office, which has had a great success in engaging with UK interlocutors over the past 6 years. So the Jersey London office, which opened in 2013, is really at the coalface of our UK engagement and provides a real platform for both Jersey stakeholders and UK-based stakeholders to come together and discuss key issues relating to Jersey's exit from the EU, the UK's exit from the EU, and Jersey's interaction with this. The London office and the UK affairs team, which sits within it, provides a very important role in overseeing not only our parliamentary engagement, our interaction with diplomatic individuals in London, and also the government ministries which oversee the relationship between the UK and Jersey. Our docking in point is the Ministry of Justice, and we have a very good relationship with the Crown Dependencies Unit within it. The UK Affairs team oversee a regular programme of engagement with UK ministers, not only with our Ministry of Justice colleagues, but also business as usual engagement with departments as necessary, whether that is Department for Transport, Department for Health and Social Care, Department for Education, the list goes on really. But we don't just focus on those who are within government, we also look at those who help to formulate policy from a wider parliamentary perspective. So that may be backbenchers in both the House of Commons and House of Lords, and also the shadow ministers and shadow spokespeople who speak to that wider political diversity in the UK. Through the Channel Islands All-Party Parliamentary Group, we aim to ensure that the island's interests are properly represented. And this is a group, again, across party and across both the House of Commons and House of Lords, who seeks to promote the island's interests, diverse and complex as they may be to many UK stakeholders. So we start from quite a high base in terms of our UK engagement, but there are definitely opportunities to grow and bolster that going forward into 2021 and beyond. One thing that we are looking to do is to make sure that Jersey's profile is as prominent as it should be, in order to ensure that our constitutional and political interests are properly addressed. One good example of this is at the recent Conservative Party conference, where we held a fringe event which spoke to Jersey's innovative approach to border testing regime and our COVID economic response more generally. This is a very positive message that we can use to diversify Jersey's offering to the UK and to ensure that both the political community and the think tanks and NGOs who participate in that policy formulation are well addressed of those issues. So we will attend UK party conferences, we will meet and brief UK parliamentarians on a regular basis, but we also want to work with those at a regional and devolved level. A key forum for this is the British-Irish Council, and we have a summit upcoming in November to discuss economic recovery from COVID in more detail, and that remains a crucial forum for ministerial engagement. We also use our physical presence in London in more normal times, perhaps, to engage physically and virtually with the diplomatic community. So there we are assisting our colleagues in the International Trade Unit and the Global Markets team to make sure that Jersey's bilateral relationships are properly addressed in the London community, who can then help to build that on a wider basis. We also seek to engage our diaspora network, so those who are from Jersey, who lived in Jersey or worked there, who are now based in the UK and more widely, to make sure that the island's profile, again, is being raised properly. And I think this is a key area of opportunity that we can seek to exploit going forward, whether this is helping students return from universities in the Christmas holidays, or seeking to bolster business opportunities between ourselves and UK stakeholders. The diaspora is a key forum for doing that in Jersey, and something we really want to build on. And we are seeking to do that through an enhanced online platform, making sure that our Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook pages have some interesting and diverse content to really engage those people. So I think I'll pause there and hand over, if that's all right, to our global markets colleagues.
Thank you, Joe. So I think I'm about to introduce the Director of Global Markets and International Agreements, if he has been able to dial in. No. Okay, I will just begin. So in today's session, we want to showcase some of the work of the Global Markets team. We'll take a high-level view, but we hope to give you some good examples of what the team have been up to in promoting the island overseas and what priorities we're pursuing. Some people might be surprised to know that Jersey has a Ministry of External Relations with a global market strategy. Our vision through this strategy is to become a more influential partner on the international stage, with maturing commercial and political relationships, increased visibility, improved access to decision makers, and greater business flows. As you'll see on the slide, the Global Market Strategy divides the Government of Jersey's engagement approach into three broad forms, reflecting the nature of and Jersey's aspirations for its relationships with priority markets. These are as follows. A protect approach is where Jersey has mature and established relationships with significant and long-standing business ties. A promote approach is where Jersey has developing relationships with strong potential for the island to win greater market share. And a pursue approach is where Jersey has comparatively underdeveloped relationships with few significant business ties and limited potential at this stage. All of these approaches are underpinned by prioritisation to achieve maximum impact with priority partners. We're targeting 6 regions based on an analysis of trends and opportunities, and I will just pick out a couple from this. One is East Asia, which accounts for 22% of the world's economy, with an average annual growth rate of 7%. A key country in this region is China. China is the world's second largest economy. It has a significant high net worth sector, an affluent middle class, and a growing private wealth sector. China is also a major investor into other global markets jurisdictions, such as Africa. So there's also opportunity for Jersey to add value in the management of Chinese and East Asian, more generally, outbound capital. Jersey has a well-established relationship in East Asia, and in this region in particular, government-to-government relationships are extremely important in helping develop the ties between jurisdictions. Picking up on North America, the US is one of the largest trading nations on Earth and the largest exporter and importer of goods and services. It has one of the world's most significant and influential financial markets, and it's also the world's largest consumer market, of interest to a range of Jersey companies looking to expand their businesses and export goods and services. It has a thriving digital sector and sits at the forefront of much innovation. All of the above in the context of North America explains why raising the island's visibility and increasing access to key decision makers within the US, whether at state or federal level, is so important. And as economic ties have increased between the US and Jersey, the government has dedicated resource to building relationships at the city, state, and federal level, as well as increasing links with the US Embassy in London. I'll leave you all to take a look at some of the other regions rather than speaking to all of them, and I'll just move forward to highlight some key activities in 2020. Now, 2020, as we know, has not been a normal year. A number of core engagements in the Global Markets Work Programme, such as specific outbound ministerial visits, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting to be held in Rwanda, and the hosting of inbound delegations to the island were either postponed or cancelled as a result of COVID-19. To ensure the development of key relationships built over time with our priority markets, the team has embraced new ways of working to sustain Jersey's visibility and access, as well as supporting the broader COVID response. I can see that Tom Lefevre has joined. I wonder if you want to pick up a couple of those key activities, Tom.
Yeah, no, thanks, Bex. And you can see, despite the 6 months practice of doing digital diplomacy, we do still sometimes have some technical issues. I should apologise because I was chairing an OECD working group meeting earlier, so I'm delighted to be able to join for this part. Bex is absolutely right to say that 2020 hasn't been a normal team, and that's certainly true for a unit like ours that deals with meeting people and accommodating visitors from other countries and indeed supporting our ministers on their outward visits. But in the first part of the year, we turned our work really to supporting COVID itself. The Global Markets team was able to help over 700 people with travel and consular inquiries when they were stuck in different locations and looking to travel to and from the island. We also helped with managing a lifeline flight service through Blue Islands that enabled the transportation of essential workers, medical patients, those travelling for compassionate reasons, and also foreign nationals who were Jersey resident but wishing to return to their home countries. The system that we put in place enabled them to do so in a safe and secure manner. By about the second quarter, end of the second quarter of this year, the team was able to resume some of our business as usual, but of course it wasn't entirely as usual. What that included was some work around the first ever virtual visit to Jersey, which was delivered in partnership with the UAE government. We had a very high impact webinar, which is now streamed on YouTube, that brought together a number of senior figures from the United Arab Emirates, including the UAE ambassador to the UK, the CEO of DIFC, the CEO of Dubai Blockchain, and the chairman of the Food and Beverage Manufacturing Group in the Dubai Chamber, together with locally the CEOs of Digital Jersey, of JFL, who I think you're going to hear from Joe shortly, and Jersey Business. And it really showcased the partnership between the two jurisdictions and also the use of digital diplomacy and new technology to demonstrate the strength of that trading relationship. We had over 69 Jersey companies participating, and we had almost 350 participants joining virtually. So in many ways, although it was an unusual format, we had a much higher level of community participation than might have been achieved during a traditional diplomatic visit. Also on this slide, you can see some of the work that we've taken forward in terms of international agreements. We made an early decision to try and continue with agreements that were already on the table or where a text is in play. And one to highlight there certainly is the government of Jersey, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the government of the United States of America working together on an asset recovery agreement, which was signed in February of this year. And that has resulted in the repatriation of $300 million US dollars of forfeited assets to Nigeria. That money has since been transferred from the Jersey Asset Forfeiture Fund, and the funds will support the construction of much needed infrastructure in Africa's most populous country in the form of two roadways that are being refurbished and the construction of a bridge. Bex, I want to come back to you, if I may, for some of the other highlights of activity in 2020, because you have been particularly involved in one of the most high profile of those, which is the recent visit of the US ambassador. So over to you.
So although, as we mentioned, a number of key events had to either be postponed or cancelled, we were pleased to be able to welcome the US ambassador to the UK, Mr. Robert Johnson, to the island earlier this month. The USA, as we've said, is a priority market for the Global Markets team, as well as at the forefront of the UK's ambitions for a free trade agreement. And as a team, we worked very closely with the International Trade Unit, in particular in relation to the negotiation of third country FTAs. So this was a timely visit for Jersey. During the ambassador's time in the island, he met local business leaders, representatives of the island's economic sectors, and a number of Jersey businesses currently doing business in or expanding to the USA. This was the first visit to the island by a serving US ambassador for over 20 years, so it provided an excellent opportunity to raise the island's visibility and generate greater access to key decision makers at such an important point in time for the island as it continues to navigate Brexit and support the economy post-COVID. If we look ahead to the final slide on our presentation, this highlights some of the key events we're considering for engagement in 2021. These are all closely linked to our geographical and regional priorities and provide opportunities to further increase the island's international profile. So here you can see opportunities for greater engagement with Rwanda, through the Commonwealth, the UAE, as well as China. Also noted on this slide in terms of priorities are our plans for international agreements, which include conclusion of those agreements already underway and the initiation of agreements with both Oman and Kuwait. As Tom would have mentioned, but I will mention now, we'd be happy to take questions offline in relation to the Global Markets Programme, because I know that Tom has to return to his OECD work. And I would like now to hand over to Joe Moynihan, the CEO of Jersey Finance, to take forward the next section of this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. For our non-Jersey participants, it might be useful just to start by way of an introduction to Jersey Finance Limited. Jersey Finance Limited is a not-for-profit organisation established almost 20 years ago. We celebrate 20 years next year. We are funded by the financial services industry and by the Jersey government, and our job is primarily to promote Jersey's international finance centre. We work very closely with our member firms, and our member firms range from international banks, international trust companies, law firms, accountancy firms with hundreds of staff, to smaller organisations with 3, 4, 5 staff and everything in between. So we act as the representative body for the industry as well as the promotional body. We work very closely with our key stakeholders at government and regulator to ensure that Jersey has the correct legislation and the correct regulation to allow us to deliver our services and products to what has increasingly become a global client base. So, in preparing for today, we thought the first thing we should probably do is just look at the Jersey relationship with the UK and with the EU, particularly in financial terms. Jersey Finance, a number of years ago, did some work with Capital Economics, an independent economics consultancy group, who did some in-depth work looking at Jersey's financial sector and trying to put some numbers around the value that we provide to the UK. The first work was undertaken back in 2012, and that piece of work, Jersey's value to the UK, was a bit of a game changer in terms of the view of the UK around Jersey, particularly at political and influential level, because it highlighted and put numbers on the value that we provide. The numbers and the values were refreshed in 2016. The figures at that time identified £500 billion worth of international investment routed through Jersey into the UK. And that investment ranges from real estate to infrastructure to direct investment in companies. Those investments support 250,000 jobs in the UK and deliver a net benefit to the UK economy of £14 billion a year. The numbers also highlighted that the net tax contribution to Her Majesty's government is £4.5 billion a year, contrary to what you might like to hear. I suspect that the numbers have probably even gone up since then. A similar piece of work carried out in relation to our European relationship highlighted that we support global investments into the EU of around €188 billion. That represents 4% of international investment into the EU and supports almost 90,000 jobs. Again, if we were to look at those and refresh those numbers today, I suspect the numbers would be significantly higher than that. So in terms of Jersey's relationship with the EU and the UK, you can see from the numbers that we generate real value to both economies. You have heard from other speakers at this point about Jersey's historic relationship with the EU and with the UK. We are not part of the UK, we are not part of the EU. And indeed, from a financial services perspective, we have never been part of the EU. So when Britain joined the EU and Protocol 3 was introduced to facilitate a lot of Jersey trade, it excluded services and in particular excluded financial services. So with regard to Brexit, our relationship with the EU hasn't changed. We have never had access to Europe as part of Europe, but our access has been as a third country. The biggest impact on Jersey in terms of European regulation was the introduction of the Alternative Investment Fund Management Directive a number of years ago. That potentially would have closed Europe to alternative investment fund managers based in the jurisdiction. However, significant amount of work carried out by regulator, by government and by industry managed to establish Jersey as an equivalent third country from an EU perspective. That third country equivalence meant that we could access European markets for alternative investment fund managers from Jersey without having the cost and the overhead of AIFMD. That provided a really solid platform for our alternative investment fund industry using a private placement regime which we had put in place. What it essentially meant is that global investment managers can use Jersey for their funds, accessing global markets, but also accessing European-based investors subject to certain restrictions. Interestingly, the position that we currently hold, using our private placement regime, which is utilised by an excess of 180 funds and fund managers accessing European institutional investors, is quite narrow in terms of the market that we are interested in. So if you want to have a pan-European retail investment fund, Jersey is not the location. Our offering sits alongside the offerings of Dublin and Luxembourg, who are better geared to deal with retail investors. Where we're interested in is the institutional investors at the top end of the market. And our arrangements with the EU have been achieved through third country equivalents and through a series of bilateral agreements which our government has signed with European countries. All of these will not be impacted, or none of these will be impacted by whatever decision the UK makes in relation to Brexit. Indeed, if the UK leaves the EU without an agreement, they will be in pretty much a similar position to us in terms of third country status and will need to seek third country equivalents to allow them access to European markets. So I guess the key message for us as an industry is that the arrangements that we have in place are not dependent on Britain's membership of the EU. They will endure, so it allows us to provide international investors, international fund managers with certainty of outcome, with stability, and with a clear view as to where they can go into the future. And we have seen business coming to the jurisdiction because of that certainty. If we just roll on to the next slide, chaps. Just to give you an idea of the size of our industry, again, just putting some boring numbers up there. The Jersey financial services industry employs over a fifth of the entire Jersey workforce. We have almost 14,000 employees in the sector. Most of those employees are professionally qualified. That is a requirement of the regulator depending on the level at which individuals are operating in an industry. That means that as an industry, this is a highly professional industry, well regulated, and we believe, given the size of our workforce, somewhat unique in terms of international financial centres, certainly of our size. We have £361 billion worth of funds under administration in our regulated space here, and over £140 billion of bank deposits. And our trust business manages wealth in excess of £600 billion for clients across the globe. And all of our trust sector is regulated by the JFSC. I talked about the professionalism that is required for people in our industry. Well, the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, which is the professional body, the global professional body for that sector, has its largest branch in Jersey, has the largest number of professionally qualified people in that sector in Jersey, which is testament to the quality and the strength and depth of our industry. One of the points that we often talk about is resilience and Jersey's ability to adapt to change. If you look back over Jersey history, you can go back as far as you like and look at how the island adapted from cod fishing to farming to tourism, etc., etc. That continues, and that is an enduring piece of Jersey's DNA. If you look at our financial services industry today and look at what it was like 30 years ago, in many areas it's unrecognisable because we have had to adapt to significant changes, both in terms of customer demand, customer requirement, international standards. But we have had that ability to deal with that and come through and continue to maintain a good long-term quality industry. In recent months, the industry has been tested as never before in terms of resilience. And what I mean by that is that everybody has been impacted by COVID. But our financial services sector customers globally have not been impacted because we've been able to continue to deliver our top quality service. I think if you had said to a CEO running a big bank or a big financial services business here in Jersey 6 months ago, or 9 months ago perhaps, that in 6 months' time the vast majority of your team will be operating from home, they would probably phone the men in white coats to take you away because they wouldn't have believed it possible. But actually it was possible, and we did adapt. And to me, it's a mark of the professionalism of both our organisations and the people within those organisations to be able to adapt and to continue to deliver service to our global client base. It's also worth pointing out that we had a huge amount of cooperation between industry, government and regulator to try and ensure that we could adapt policy and regulations to ensure we delivered business as usual without compromising on our regulatory standards. Another point well worth making at this stage is that when we talk about resilience and we talk about the ability to adapt, one of the key talents you need to do that is to be able to look to the future, envisage what might happen in the future. And we now point to our telecoms infrastructure. 10 years ago, the Jersey government supported its wholly owned telecoms company to put in a brand new fibre optic telecommunications network for the island. 1 gigabit fibre optic connectivity to every home and business on the island. The decision was made with a view to the future. I don't think anybody necessarily predicted at the time that this would help us in the event of a pandemic, but certainly in terms of the resilience of the island, it was extremely important. So we had situations where we had couples both working from home, kids homeschooling and downloading Netflix and whatever else they shouldn't have been doing. And the network that we have, the backbone, was well able to cope with that. And certainly for our business and our colleagues within industry, dealing with partners in different jurisdictions, in the event of telecoms problems, invariably it wasn't in Jersey, it was elsewhere. And I think that all of us over the last 6 months have got so used to using our telecoms infrastructure, the new technology. Some of my colleagues have said we have done more digitally in the last 6 months than we did in the previous 5 years. I think necessity sometimes can be a great support for invention, and that's certainly a case here. Also, we are aware as an industry that the Jersey government and Jersey as an island has significant challenges in terms of economic recovery. And our industry is supporting government with that and providing expertise as and when required. So this resilience supports not just our global customers, but also our island generally. So, moving on, chaps. The one thing I just want to touch on, but I don't want to labour this because sometimes we're inclined to overplay it. But as an industry, the island's reputation and the quality of our regulation is really, really important, and it's becoming more and more important all of the time. Institutional investors, international wealthy individuals do not want to be associated with jurisdictions that have a less than reputable reputation. Jersey has been assessed on a continuous basis by global standard setters in terms of how we conduct our business and what we do here. The names are on the slide. This is over a period of the last 10 years, but the message is consistent, that we are a well-regulated jurisdiction, that we take our responsibilities extremely seriously in this area. And for me, it's very important because these are the people who set the standards. These are the people who are not going to be our cheerleaders, but they've actually assessed us and we're found to be up in the top tier. The IMF said that Jersey as a jurisdiction is in the Premier League of international finance centres, including members of the G20 and the EU. The World Bank, when it looked at our beneficial ownership registry, said that we were an exemplar as to how to manage and run a registry. So I think as a jurisdiction, we can be very proud of where we are, but we will continue to adapt because standards change all the time. The requirements of the international community change all of the time, and we can adapt, and it's nothing necessarily that we need to be afraid of. So, in terms of Brexit and the EU, as I've said, from where we sit at the moment, our position with the EU won't change. But again, looking to the future and talking about adapting and talking about foresight, the Jersey government and the industry took strategic decisions 15, 20 years ago that if we were going to grow an international finance centre, we had to think much more broadly than the UK and Europe. We needed to look at where the opportunities were in the world. And as a consequence, we now find ourselves in the position that in excess of 50% of new business in the financial services sector comes from outside of the EU and the UK. We, Jersey Finance, have offices in Hong Kong, in Dubai, in London and New York, representing Jersey and representing the Jersey financial services industry. The messages that our people in region provide to key influencers, banks, decision makers, fund managers, is all around the quality of the jurisdiction, the resilience, the ability to adapt, but also the professionalism that as a jurisdiction we provide. Our team, who you can see, I won't go through them all in detail, but each represents their own area, but also work very closely. And one of the things that has come out of the pandemic is that our team in the various jurisdictions are working a lot better as a team, because pre-pandemic people were busy, people were running around, they were at meetings, they were travelling, but now they are not travelling as much as they used to, so they're able to work jointly, presenting to key influencers and to do work better on strategic alliances. Our markets, you will notice from the document, align with the strategy of government in terms of global markets and important countries. But for us, the key growth areas continue to be the GCC, which is a big, very important business area for our jurisdiction. India, China, Hong Kong continue to be important to us. And the US, we opened an office in the US in October of last year. As Rebecca and Tom said, 2020 didn't actually turn out as we had thought it would, and we certainly, our plans for our development work has changed significantly, but we continue to push the key messages about Jersey as a jurisdiction. So, in terms of the opportunities, I would say that we should be very proud of the position that Jersey is in today. We have a well-established, highly reputable industry. We have significant strength and depth across all sectors. McKinsey, when they did their strategic review back in 2012-13, talked about Jersey's financial services ecosystem and talked about the fact that we have a good quality group across all sectors. So if you look at our banking sector, which underpins lots of the businesses that we have here, we have 25 of the world's leading banks in Jersey from right across the globe. Really, really important. Better than any jurisdiction of our size. We have global accountancy firms, international law firms, fund managers, trust and corporate service providers, many of them headquartered here. So that strength and breadth and depth, to me, is unique. The island has benefited by the political and fiscal stability we've enjoyed over a number of years. Jersey has been very astute in terms of trying to manage its budget over the economic cycles, has been very astute in ensuring that we had built up a significant rainy day fund. And guess what, folks? For the last few months it has been raining. So it's no big surprise that we've had to look at the rainy day fund to give us the ability to borrow money to see us through this crisis. But there is no reason for anyone to panic given the position that we're in, because we're in a lot stronger position than many other jurisdictions. We don't have, relatively speaking, a significant problem in terms of where we find ourselves. That's my view. Not everybody is going to agree, but do some comparisons and see where everybody else stands. Again, to me, it's very much about good forward-thinking, strategic decisions made at the right time. So that political and fiscal stability is very, very important. And one of the reasons for that is that international investors don't want to place their assets in a jurisdiction which is subject to the political whims or changes in fiscal policy as a result of some knee-jerk reactions. And we've been able to provide that on a consistent basis over many years, and it's the bedrock of what we do as a jurisdiction. We also have an independent judiciary. We take that for granted. That is not the case in a lot of jurisdictions. We have an experienced judiciary. We've been in financial services for almost 60 years. There is a strong body of case law to support decisions, which means, again, that international investors using this jurisdiction have this certainty of outcome, have this comfort of knowing that we have the experience of dealing with complex cases. And all of that is underpinned by good quality trust, company and funds laws. And we're constantly looking at the legislation. We're constantly looking at the legislation to make sure that it is to the highest standard and it can facilitate opportunities as they arise. We have a history of being innovative in terms of developing new laws and new products. We talk about fintech aspirations. Well, there is a huge amount of work going on in fintech. Sometimes we don't call it fintech. So, for example, compare how you deal with your bank today and how you dealt with them 10 years ago. It's completely different. And that's fintech. It's using technology to drive financial services. We work closely with Digital Jersey to ensure that the industry understands the digital opportunities. And, we work closely with Digital Jersey. They're doing a fantastic job of raising Jersey's profile as a jurisdiction, but also in terms of training and development, both in terms of young people and career switchers. So there's a lot to be positive about. From a Jersey finance point of view, we believe that this island has significant opportunities. We don't believe that Brexit is going to have any significant issues for us as an industry. We've already diversified outside of the EU. We have a base of expertise. We have development opportunities in all of the jurisdictions we mentioned, and probably indeed in some more. We work closely with the industry, who are generally best placed to see where the opportunities are, but we also do a lot of lead work in Jersey finance. So, for example, at the moment, we're doing some work on sustainable finance with the support of the industry, with the support of government, to see how we can ensure that Jersey will be seen as a good place to centre sustainable finance. There is a lot of that activity going on already, but we think there's an opportunity for us to do a lot more. We have a very collaborative relationship with our key partners on the island. You can see all of the names up there. Sometimes we have different responsibilities and we have different focuses and we agree to disagree. But ultimately, one of the key advantages of this jurisdiction is that we all work well together to promote Jersey as an international finance centre. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. So I am James Silverstone and I'm the Director of Financial Services for the Government of Jersey. I run a small team in government with really three main responsibilities. First is to work with colleagues, including ones on stage, to really promote and protect Jersey's interests internationally. Secondly, to ensure that working with Joe and others, we do recognise and take advantages of opportunities for our industry to grow, and where necessary, supporting them, for example, through legislation. And thirdly, to ensure that individuals on the island have a financial services sector that works for them, that they're protected, for example, when they open a bank account or they take out a pension, for example. Now, Joe has very clearly set out the visions and opportunities for the financial services sector. I'm going to spend just a few minutes on maybe the slightly more prosaic but still important issue of preparing for the end of the transition period. And listening to colleagues' remarks, what's striking is actually our preparations really rest on a lot of what has already been talked about. So, for example, the strong independent relationship we have with the EU, the resilience that we already have. Now, Senator Gorst and the chair of the JFSC, Mark Hoban, will be writing to all financial services CEOs shortly, reminding them of what they should be doing to be preparing for the end of the transition period. Unsurprisingly, this is pretty similar to a letter they sent out last year when we were all looking at Brexit and the potential of no transition period. But it's really important that firms take advantage of the opportunity to refresh their plans. And here there's good news. A lot won't change for Jersey businesses on the 31st of December, given that, as others have said, Jersey isn't in the EU now and still won't be in the EU next year. So we have the independent relationship that Tom was referring to. And that relationship is really conducted at all levels, from ministerial discussions, which have been increasing, to colleagues in the room, to our own dedicated Channel Islands Brussels office, and our regulator also has strong relationships there. And that has led to agreements which are beneficial to Jersey. So, for example, the assessed equivalence in a number of areas, for example, audit requirement and prudential requirements. Of course, for Jersey, as Joe has alluded to, for the fund sector, a real prize here is equivalence for AFMD, so that we can use a third country passports for that. We're, of course, here still waiting for the EU to determine its approach to equivalence more broadly with the context of the EU. Hopefully, when they have done that, there will be progress for us. It could be a while, but let's see on that. And in the meantime, private placement regime is still there and is still being used very successfully where that is appropriate. An important factor we are told for business is ensuring the free flow of data, both from the EU and the UK. And again, there's good news here. We don't have to worry about data flow. Jersey continues to be recognised by the EU for the purpose of data adequacy, and we are updating our domestic regulation so that we can recognise the UK regime. We updated it last year, and that update runs out at the end of this year. We'll be updating it again so that while the UK determines its regime and its relationship with the EU, there'll be no difficulty in transferring data between Jersey and the UK, at least until the end of 2021. And obviously we will determine what happens at that time. We have had the odd question or so around on the tax side. Of course, DTAs and all those sorts of arrangements remained in place. While we're talking about stability with the EU, can I just support a point that Tom made? This is clearly the relationship which we have and are developing with the EU. This does present opportunities to build on. I spent several years working in the European Commission, and they really, really welcome areas where they think and they consider themselves to be playing an international lead. So, for example, on sustainability, they really welcome working with others outside the EU to promote these agendas and demonstrate how they are providing a lead in these areas. So I think there really is an opportunity. And I think it would be very interesting if people can pose some questions around that or give them some thoughts around that. Of course, not everything does stay the same. Some things will be different and there will be changes. Again, hardly surprising, the regulatory environment between the UK and the EU on financial services will be changing fundamentally. And in many cases, this is still to be determined. There is no indication of equivalence in the short term for most areas, which means that passporting won't happen. In some areas which are important for financial stability, like clearinghouses, temporary arrangements are in place. In other areas like investment services, MiFID, the EU has been explicit the UK equivalents will just have to wait for wider review. Of course, this has been known for some time, and everything we're hearing is this has been widely mitigated by restructuring. So, for example, the use of mancos and delegation, of moving business units, etc. The UK, in the run-up to Brexit, has onshored EU legislation. This largely stays the same, but you will want to understand, for example, reporting requirements and who you need to report to, for example. There is a very helpful FCA site which gives more details around that. On data flows, the UK is still seeking an adequacy decision from the EU. So none of this should affect the direct relationship, but if you're using intermediaries or you're a part of a group, you will want to understand the impact of that. Within Jersey, of course, there are some things you will want to consider. After being trailed for several times, finally there will be the end of the EU arrangement and the EU transition. And elsewhere in these 2 days, there has been talk around the continuity arrangements and all the non-financial services consideration, which FS firms, just like any other firms, will need to consider. So, for example, in the event of no further negotiated outcome, contingency measures are still in place to ensure continuity of supplies, etc. EU staff should by now have applied for the settlement scheme. If they haven't, they have 6 months in 20 or 21 to do so. So we really encourage you to support your staff in reminding themselves to do that. There have been some minor tweaks. There have been some minor tweaks to legislation. These are very boring tweaks, really to ensure our legislation remains operative following the full exit. So, for example, this is things like UK and EU institutions, ensuring that references to EU and UK institutions, other references to UK and EU law are appropriately taken into account. So, final slide is really the planning checklist. As others have alluded to, 2020 has essentially been one long continuity event. Been working from home, got that off pat, uncertainty about transport links, we've had to deal with it in spades, but you will want to review and ensure your continuity plans are appropriate for the risks here. So you want to update those, ensure that key decision makers are contactable over the New Year period, although in some cases you might not be able to get off the island anyway, but that's how it goes. Getting assurance over group intermediate relationships, ensuring your EU staff, as I said, have applied for the EU settlement scheme, and do keep talking to our supervisors, and also talk to us as well. I mean, if there are things you think we're missing or we really need to be addressing, please do get in touch with us directly as well as your supervisors. We really do want to hear from you. Thank you.
The end of the formal presentations for this afternoon, but we have had a number of questions submitted via Slido, so I'll take a few of these and pass them out to the panel. For the first one, will Jersey be able to rely on the City of London as the EU's key financial centre in the coming decades? Joe, I think I'd hand that one over to you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Nice, easy one to kick off. I think that there will be changes. We've seen some changes already in terms of how the UK and how firms operating traditionally out of the UK have now had to do some business directly into Europe. However, I think we need to bear in mind that the UK's position in financial services has been established over many, many, many years. And the expertise and the experience that they have developed is not necessarily as transferable perhaps as some people might like to think. And it's important to note that London is a truly international centre, so while certainly there's an element of EU business, there's also a lot of global business, and that global business often has a link or will develop a link into Jersey. So from a Jersey perspective, we'd still be quite confident that London's position will remain very solid from our perspective, subject to some tweaks, but it's not going to be quite as straightforward perhaps as certain member states in the EU think, to just switch everything across. There is some switching going on, as I say, but the Jersey financial services industry is much broader than just the EU.
Thank you, Joe. We had a question around which free trade agreements most benefit the services sector. James, would you like to answer that one?
Thank you, Bex. I think it's probably helpful to think about what an FTA primarily is, and that's about market access. So clearly those countries where we have the greatest trade and the largest potential markets are the ones which are particularly interesting. We know that the US is agreeing the FTA at the moment. Of course, in a financial services context, the really interesting, the nitty-gritty stuff is around regulation as much as market access and non-discrimination. And I think it's quite interesting to see the UK is seeking to build regulatory ties alongside the formal FTA agreement. And I think that's something that's interesting we should watch and potentially see the opportunity for a Jersey role in this case. But I'd also just remind people it's not just about FTAs, it's also about the range of other initiatives that the Jersey negotiates. So, for example, the double tax treaties and also, the bilateral investment treaties, which my colleagues are negotiating.
Thank you, James. One for our European relations colleagues. What work is being done to emphasise our cultural links with Europe, and does this support our ambitions there? Tom, to you.
Thanks, Bex. Yes, well, Government of Jersey has now a long-standing investment in an office in Normandy, in Caen, and they have within their remit responsibility for looking at a series of initiatives in cultural areas, and I see quite a lot going on in this area. We'd love to do more, but I already see things going on in art, in music, in language, in the French festival that goes on in the Channel Islands. So there's a lot being done with France, and there is increasingly work being done with the likes of Germany, where of course we've got a really, really interesting historical link, and now with some of our more of our latest relationships that we have with the likes of Poland and Portugal. So yes, it really does support our ambitions there, because it goes to the heart of, well, what does a good relationship look like? A good relationship doesn't just look like trade. It also has things like culture in there. It has things like what are your common values? Can you learn from one another? And that's what we're really trying to introduce into some of our relationships in Europe. Could we do more? We'd love to do more. It's not hard to crack my email address. It's tom.t.wherry@gov.je. So give me an email and let me know if you've got any more ideas.
Thank you. Another one focused on financial services. Will it be in the EU's interest for the UK to retain a prominent position in financial services? And what might this mean for Jersey? Joe, I turn to you first.
Thank you. I think it probably depends on who you ask in the EU, because this is a double-edged sword. There is a lot of business comes through the UK, which is a benefit to the EU, where the UK is acting as a conduit. What the EU would like to do is to take a lot of business out of London and put into EU-based finance centres, like perhaps Frankfurt, Dublin, Paris. And as I said, there is some of that transition happening already. But I don't think that Brexit is going to mean that the UK loses its prominent international position as a finance centre, because frankly it's taken far too long to develop. And while there will be some job shifts, I don't necessarily see a significant change from a London perspective. For us here in Jersey, well, we've got good relationships with Europe and we've got good relationships with London. So I think we can be confident, again, going back to the subject of adaptability. I think we've got the foundations to be able to provide us with that adaptability to be able to cope with whatever comes out of all of this.
Thank you. Returning to European relations, I think some of this, Tom, you might want to refer back to your slide on the priority countries in Europe, and also picking up a question further down around the next countries that we might want to build a relationship with in Europe.
Yeah, thanks, Bex. If I'm having to answer this one, then I probably didn't do too well in my presentation, but there we go, I'll give it another go. So yeah, as I mentioned, France is really away and above as our number one priority because of its close geographic proximity, of course, the kind of cultural links that we have there already, but also because of its political might, both at the EU level and international level. So that really is above and away our main priority. We have a relatively small team, so we're not going to go about Europe and try and create a great relationship with absolutely everyone. So we have a more targeted approach for some of those other countries. I mentioned Germany and Ireland, where we see a lot of room for kind of increasing our diplomatic relationship with those two countries. And then I also mentioned that we do have some new friends, such as the Netherlands or Switzerland, where we do see that we can work together on more specific issues. So that's what I'd answer for that one.
Perfect, thank you. And a final one focused on financial services and the City of London. If the City of London is negatively affected, will Jersey be too? Joe.
We did it? Yeah. Thank you. I think the reality is that we have a very symbiotic relationship with the City of London as a finance centre, and a lot of our business either goes into London or comes out of London. And most firms in Jersey would have good relationships with London. So if there was a massive downturn in the UK, it undoubtedly would have some impact on us here. However, it's important to note, I think one of the slides mentioned about the relationships that the UK is trying to develop with other countries, and we would have a role to play in some of those successful business relationships, which could mean that there would be some more business routed through Jersey. We certainly would be in discussion with colleagues in government about potential opportunities in that area. So I think that it would be naive to say that if the financial services industry in London was completely decimated, it would not have an impact on here, because it would. I don't necessarily see that being the case. We have a good relationship with City UK, which represents the financial services industry in London, and there are lots of plans to ensure that London maintained its preeminent position. So I think from our perspective, we can still remain reasonably confident in that regard.
Thank you, Joe. A question on what opportunities are there outside of free trade agreements? Phil, I'll pass that on to you.
Yeah, sure. So I mainly focused on free trade agreements today, but as with the rest of the panel here, there's many other opportunities. James talked about bilateral investment treaties, double taxation agreements. Tom's talked about the cultural links that we can build on. Bex has talked about the recent visit of the US ambassador and building on those relationships with the US. So there's many other opportunities outside of FTAs that we can build on.
Great, thank you. Will Jersey's interests be fully represented and maintained post the 31st of December with its key partners in the UK and in Europe? James, would you be able to take that one forward from a governmental perspective?
Sure. I think everything that's been said today by Tom and Bex and others, I think, will kind of indicates actually the level of work that is going on to promote and support our relationships both within Europe and across the world. Tom's team was established fairly recently with exactly that job. We've got the Brussels office, we've got the global office, Jersey Finance, and everyone else. So yes.
And Joe from the UK Affairs team, would you like to come in on that question as well? Okay.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me okay.
We can, thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Bex, thank you. The UK relationship will be key going forward, absolutely, and we have assurances from the UK government that not only in the preparation for the end of the transition period, but also for Jersey's relationship going forward, whether that be constitutional, political or commercial, that we will be maintaining good relationships, and we will have those dock-in points, whether that's through the Ministry of Justice, Cabinet Office, or our very good bilateral relationship with UK government departments. I think, as I spoke to earlier, the wider relationship with UK political stakeholders and on a commercial level working with Jersey Finance, Jersey Business will ensure that we have a holistic approach to that relationship going forward, and a deep and diverse one that doesn't just end as a transition period does. So that's what I'd say on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We have two more questions left on Slido. Thank you for everyone who has put forward questions. But the first one is, how much of a competitor will the UK become for the finance industry here in Jersey? Joe.
Thank you very much. The straight answer is we don't know. The reality is that in terms of certain sectors and in certain segments of our industry, we're in a stronger position just at the moment than the UK, particularly where we talk about AIFMD and European access. The UK needs to establish third country equivalents. They have quite a lot of work to do there. If I was a cynic, I suspect that if we have a no-deal Brexit, that Europe won't be in any massive rush to facilitate the UK. But a lot of what we do is complementary, and I think that we don't know what way they're going to pan. I don't think they know themselves. But we'll just keep an eye and see how things develop, to be perfectly honest. But there is a lot of business that we do here that complements what they do in the UK, and one would think that it would be quite difficult to just attack our industry in certain areas because of the expertise and the experience that we have.
Great, thank you. And of the various opportunities that we've heard about today, which area does the panel think has the most value for Jersey and should have the most investment or focus? That's an easy one, isn't it? Phil, I'll pass that over to you.
Thanks, Beth.
Everyone else is delighted.
So, I think this question is a really good one, and the answer is probably they all have value in their own ways. And if there's anything that Brexit has taught us, is that we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket, and diversification is the way to make sure that we can focus and prosper going forward. So in terms of what is the most value, I think everybody's spoken today, and the value that's on all of those items is as equal across the board, and we should be focused on all of them.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, for watching and for your participation in relation to the questions submitted. I wanted to say a big thank you to all of the presenters today, both over in the panel in Jersey as well as in London. Thank you very much for your time. If there are any questions that we've not managed to answer today, please do email those in to beyondbrexitevent@gov.je, and we'll be pleased to respond. Thank you very much for your time.